when a struggling waitress's simple act of kindness toward a disabled boy touches the heart of a billionaire dad. It sparks a life-changing journey that proves love and hope can come from the most unexpected places. It was just another quiet morning in a small roadside diner. The neon sign outside flickered as a light breeze moved the old metal door. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, toast, and fried eggs. Emily stood behind the counter, wiping it clean for the 5th time that day. She had been working there since 6 in the morning. Although her legs hurt and her back ached, her smile was still on her face. Emily was only 24, but her eyes looked older. Not tired in a dull way, but heavy like they carried too many stories for someone her age. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a caregiver, a sister, and a daughter who had been through more than most people twice her age. Yet she always greeted each customer with kindness, remembered their orders, and made them feel welcome. Her coworkers often wondered how she stayed so patient. She never complained when someone was rude. She didn't roll her eyes when the tips were small. Instead, she treated everyone like they mattered. But few knew the reason behind her calm strength. Emily's life outside the diner was not easy. She lived in a tiny apartment on the edge of town with her younger brother Noah, who was born with muscular dystrophy. He couldn't walk or move freely, and Emily had been caring for him ever since their father abandoned them. Their mother had fallen sick a few years ago and couldn't work anymore, which meant Emily had to be everything: nurse, cook, guardian, and provider. She once dreamed of being a nurse, working in a hospital and helping people for a living. But life had other plans. She had to leave college in her 2nd year when her mother's health got worse. Since then, the diner became her life. It didn't pay much, but it kept the lights on and the medicine stocked. Every tip went straight to bills. Every break was a phone call to check on her brother. And every free second was used to think about how she could make things better. That morning, she poured coffee for a regular customer. The bell above the door rang. She looked up and saw a man in a dark suit enter. He was tall, sharply dressed, and clearly didn't belong in their small-town diner. But what caught her attention wasn't him. It was the little boy in the wheelchair beside him. The boy looked about 7 or 8 years old, with dark curly hair and soft eyes. He didn't say anything as the man wheeled him to a corner table. Just looked around the diner quietly, as if everything felt unfamiliar. The man, who Emily would later know as Thomas, looked serious, even a little lost, like he didn't know what to do next. Emily walked over, smiling warmly. "Good morning. What can I get for you both?" she asked. Thomas looked at the menu, then gently spoke. "Just some pancakes for him. Coffee for me. Black." She knelt down so she could speak to the boy. "And what's your name, sweetheart?" The boy didn't answer, just looked at her, unsure. Thomas answered for him. "His name's Jamie." Emily nodded. "Hi, Jamie. I'll bring your pancakes soon, and I'll make sure they're the fluffiest ones we have." As she walked away, she glanced back and saw Thomas struggling to help Jamie sit comfortably. He seemed unsure of how to adjust the blanket or how close to place the table. Emily recognized that struggle. It was the same look her mother had when she first learned how to help Noah. That feeling of not knowing how to care for someone you love and being afraid you'll mess it up. She brought their order quickly and placed the plate gently in front of Jamie. Then she noticed something. Jamie was struggling to hold the fork. His hands were shaking slightly. Thomas watched but didn't move. He looked frozen, like he didn't know whether to help or let Jamie try on his own. Without saying anything, Emily sat down beside Jamie and smiled. "Would it be okay if I helped you?" Jamie nodded shyly. She picked up the fork and cut the pancake into small bites. Then she slowly fed him, speaking to him in a soft, cheerful voice, asking him if he liked it, telling him that he had the most adorable smile. Thomas watched. At first, he didn't react. But then, something in his face shifted. A deep sadness came over his expression. He looked away for a moment, pretending to check his phone, but he wasn't really looking at anything. He was just trying not to let his emotions show. Emily didn't notice. She was too focused on Jamie. She wiped his mouth with a napkin, complimented him when he finished a bite, and laughed gently when he made a face at the taste of the syrup. For her, this wasn't strange. She had done this hundreds of times with her brother. It was second nature now. When they were done, Thomas stood and took out his wallet, paid the bill quietly, and left $100 tip. Emily was surprised. "That's too much," she said, looking at the bill. He looked at her for a long moment. "It's not even close to enough." Before she could ask what he meant, he turned and wheeled Jamie out of the diner. That night, as Emily walked home, she thought about the boy. There was something in his eyes that reminded her of Noah, a kind of quiet loneliness. The way children look when they want to be part of the world but don't know how. And the man as father, he seemed powerful, but also lost. Like someone who had everything but didn't know how to use it at home. She opened the front door and was greeted by her brother's excited voice. "Emmy, you're late. I know. The pancakes took too long," she joked, setting down her bag. She helped him with dinner, gave him his medicine, and later read him his favorite book. After she made sure her mother was resting, she finally sat down. Her feet were killing her, but she was used to it. Still, her mind kept drifting back to Jamie, and to that strange man who watched her so carefully. Somehow, she knew that wasn't the last time she would see them. What Emily didn't know was that Thomas had driven back to his luxury hotel, sat in silence for hours, and thought about what he had witnessed. A simple waitress had done in minutes what he hadn't been able to do in months: make his son feel seen, cared for, and safe. That single moment had shaken something deep inside him, and from that moment on, he couldn't forget her. Not because she was kind, not even because she was gentle, but because she had shown his son something he hadn't been able to give him: real human warmth. Thomas had all the money in the world, but not the kind of love Emily gave so freely. And while Emily lay in bed wondering how to get through another long week, Thomas was already planning when he would return to the diner. Because something inside him had changed. He just didn't know yet how much. But soon. Both their lives would take a turn they never expected. All because of one plate of pancakes. And a moment of kindness that touched a heart that had forgotten how to feel. Thomas Whitmore sat alone in his hotel room, staring out the wide glass window that overlooked the city. From this high up, everything looked small. Cars like toys, people like ants. But his thoughts were not with the city below.
Well, wide weather lovely. Oh, well, right eyed over. I will why I
A small roadside diner, a waitress with kind eyes, and his little boy, Jamie, who had smiled for the first time in weeks. It had only been a few hours since they left the diner. But Thomas couldn't stop thinking about it. The image of Emily gently feeding Jamie, talking to him like he was the most special person in the world, played again and again in his mind. There was something about her that unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a way that made him feel things he had pushed away for years. Thomas Whitmore was not used to feeling powerless. He was one of the richest men in the country, a billionaire who had built a tech empire from the ground up. People respected him, feared him, envied him. He had private jets, luxury homes, and employees who jumped when he spoke. None of that. Power helped him when it came to Jamie. Jamie hadn't always been in a wheelchair. 2 years ago, they were a happy family: Thomas, his wife Claire, and their energetic little boy. They used to take trips together, play games, eat ice cream at night. Thomas was busy with work, yes, but he always found time for his family. At least that's what he told himself. Then came the accident. It was a rainy night. Claire was driving home with Jamie from his swimming class. Thomas was in a meeting across the country. The brakes failed. The car spun off the road. Claire died on the spot. Jamie survived, but barely. He was in a coma for weeks. When he woke up, he couldn't move his legs. The doctors said the damage was permanent. Thomas had been devastated. He blamed himself for not being there, for not fixing the car sooner, for everything. But instead of facing the pain, he drowned himself in work. He hired the best doctors, the best therapists, the best nurses. He paid for everything Jamie could need, except his presence. He didn't know how to be with his son anymore. The guilt was too heavy. Every time he looked at Jamie, he saw Claire. And the silence between father and son grew louder every day. That's why the diner visit had shocked him so much. Emily didn't see Jamie as broken. She didn't talk to him like a patient. She saw a child, and she treated him with love, patience, and care. And Jamie responded. His eyes lit up. He laughed. He didn't look at Thomas with fear or sadness. He looked happy. Thomas realized something terrible that night. He hadn't made his son laugh in months. The next morning, Thomas made a decision. He woke up early, got Jamie ready, and returned to the diner. Emily was there just like before, wearing the same apron and tying her hair back. She looked tired, but her smile returned the moment she saw Jamie. "You're back," she said, kneeling beside the boy. "I was hoping I'd see you again," Thomas said little. He just watched. He watched how Jamie opened up to her, how Emily listened, laughed, joked, and gave him all her attention. She even remembered his favorite pancake toppings, blueberries, and extra syrup. This time, Thomas didn't just observe. He stayed a little longer, listened to the way Emily talked, and even asked her a few questions. He learned that she had a brother with similar needs, that she worked long hours, and that she had no car and walked home every night. Everything she did out of love. No money, no rewards, just love. Over the next week, Thomas and Jamie returned to the diner every day. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening. Every time, Emily was there. She became their routine, their quiet comfort. And slowly, Thomas began to change. He started asking more questions about Jamie's care. He began to notice the way Emily spoke to Jamie with encouragement, not pity. He learned how she helped him feel independent, even when helping him eat. He watched as she treated his son like a whole person, not someone broken. One night, after their fourth visit, Thomas stood by Jamie's bed in their hotel room. Jamie had fallen asleep, smiling. It was a rare sight. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his son's peaceful face. His hands shook as he reached out and gently touched Jamie's hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have been there. I didn't know how." It was the first time he had said those words aloud. He thought about Claire. How she used to handle things with grace. How she would have loved Emily. How proud she would have been to see Jamie laugh again. Guilt twisted in his chest. For so long, he had believed money was enough. That if he paid the best people to take care of Jamie, that meant he was doing his part. But Emily showed him what was missing. She showed him that care wasn't about paychecks. It was about presence, patience, and heart. The next morning, Thomas did something unusual. He made breakfast. He didn't know how to cook well, but he tried. He burned the toast and spilled the orange juice. But Jamie smiled when he saw his father trying. They sat together and ate. Jamie didn't say much, but he looked at his father differently, like maybe he was finally coming back. Thomas knew he couldn't fix the past. He couldn't bring back Claire or change what happened. But he could change what came next, and it started with Emily. He drove back to the diner one afternoon. Without Jamie, Emily was cleaning a table. She looked up, surprised to see him alone. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said, then hesitated. "Can we talk?" She nodded and led him to a booth. "I owe you more than I can say," Thomas began. "You've done more for my son in a week than anyone else has done in a year." Emily looked down, modest as always. "He's a sweet kid. Just needed someone to see him." Thomas nodded slowly. "I haven't been a good father. I thought giving him everything meant I was doing enough. But I see now that he didn't need things. He needed me. Emily didn't say anything, but her eyes softened. I want to ask you something, he continued. I want to hire you not as a waitress, but as Jamie's caregiver, a full-time companion. You'd live with us if you want. The pay will be generous. You'll have health insurance, a car, and I'll make sure your family is cared for. Emily's eyes widened. Her heart began to race. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to answer now, Thomas said. But please think about it. I think Jamie needs you. And honestly, ... I think I do too. He stood, handed her a card with his number, and left Emily sat in the booth long after he was gone, the card trembling in her fingers. She thought of her brother, her mother, their tiny apartment, the unpaid bills, and she thought of Jamie's smile, the way he had clung to her hand, the way Thomas had looked at her not like a billionaire, but like a father trying to make things right. That night, she walked home slowly. Her mind was full of questions. Was it real? Could she trust him? Could she leave the diner, the only job she had ever known? When she reached home, her brother greeted her with his usual grin. Did you bring any leftovers? She smiled and ruffled his hair. As they ate dinner, she looked around the tiny apartment. The peeling paint, the broken fan, the stack of medical bills. And she thought, maybe this was a door that life had finally opened. She didn't know what the future would bring, but deep in her heart she felt something she hadn't felt. In a long time, hope. And it all started with a pancake and a moment of kindness that no one expected would change everything. Emily stared at the card in her hand for what felt like hours, sat on her kitchen table like something from another world. She had looked at it again and again since Thomas left the diner. It was a plain white business card with his name, number, and company, printed in neat bold letters. Thomas Whitmore Tech. Simple, yet powerful. She had seen his name in the news before, in magazines she could never afford to buy, but sometimes read while waiting in the hospital lobby with her brother. A billionaire, a genius, a man from a world completely different from hers. Now he wanted her to work for him. That night, Emily barely slept. She kept thinking about the offer. A full-time job taking care of Jamie, living in his house, a good salary, health insurance, a car. It sounded like a dream, but was it real? Could she trust him? And more importantly, could she leave her family behind? She looked over at her mother's bedroom door, slightly open. The soft sound of her breathing told Emily she was resting peacefully. Mother had been doing better lately, but still needed care. And then there was Noah, her sweet little brother who needed help with almost everything. Could she really leave them? The next morning, Emily made breakfast like always. Toast, scrambled eggs, tea. She helped Noah get ready for his online therapy session and gave her mom her medicine. Then, as she washed the dishes, she heard Noah's voice. Emmy, are you sad? She turned and saw him sitting in his wheelchair, watching her with concern. She smiled weakly. No, just thinking a lot. Is it about the fancy man with the suit? He asked. Emily was surprised. You heard me talking about him? You said he wants to give you a job? Emily nodded. Yes, a big job. But it means I might have to leave for a while. Noah looked down. Will you be gone forever? She walked over, knelt beside him, and held his hand. Never forever, but maybe for some time. He thought for a moment, then smiled a little. If it means you get to help another kid like me, I think you should go. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. You're the best little brother in the world. Later that day, Emily made the call. Her hands shook as she dialed Thomas's number. When he answered, his voice was calm and warm. I've thought about your offer, she said nervously. If it's still open, I'd like to accept. There was a pause. Then Thomas replied softly, Yes, the offer is still open. And thank you, Emily. Truly. The very next morning, a black car pulled up in front of her apartment building. A driver stepped out and helped her load a small suitcase. She hugged her mother and Noah tightly. It wasn't forever. She promised she'd visit often. She would. Send money home. Make sure they had everything they needed. As the car drove off, She looked back one last time at the small building that had been her whole world. It was hard to leave, but she was also ready to begin something new. When they arrived at Thomas's house, Emily couldn't believe her eyes. It was a mansion, elegant but not flashy. Tall windows, wide gardens, and a peaceful silence surrounded the house. A woman greeted her at the door and introduced herself as the housekeeper, Maria. She showed Emily to her room, bright, clean, with its own bathroom and a view of the garden. Felt like a hotel. Then she met Jamie again. He was sitting in his wheelchair in the living room, looking out the window. When he saw Emily, his face lit up with a shy smile. "You came," he said. "Of course I did," she replied, kneeling beside him. "I told you I'd bring extra blueberry pancakes, didn't I?" He giggled, and Emily felt a warmth in her heart. She began her new job that did not just as a caregiver, but as a friend, a listener, and a companion. Every morning, she helped Jamie get ready. She sat with him during meals, read books to him, played games, and did exercises the doctors recommended. But it wasn't just about doing tasks. She made him feel loved. She talked to him like a friend, asked about his dreams, and listened to his worries. And Jamie began to change. He laughed more. He asked more questions, wanted to draw, to go outside, to explore again. Slowly, the boy who once looked lost began to shine again. Thomas noticed every bit of it. At first, Thomas kept his distance. He watched from the hallway, silently observing. Had spent so long hiding behind his work that he didn't know how to connect with Jamie. But Emily never pressured him. She just did what she always did, gave love without asking for anything in return. One day, she invited Thomas to join them for a board game. He hesitated, then said yes. He sat stiffly at first, unsure what to do. But Jamie laughed when his father lost a round and something shifted. Thomas smiled. A real, soft, honest smile. Over the next few days, he joined them more often. He watched how Emily spoke to Jamie, how she encouraged him, celebrated small victories, and listened patiently. And he started copying her. He began feeding Jamie himself sometimes. He helped with bedtime stories. He even tried pushing Jamie's wheelchair during their garden walks. It was awkward at first, but Emily supported him with gentle suggestions and quiet encouragement. She never judged, never told him what he was doing wrong. She just made space for him to grow one night. As Emily and Thomas sat in the garden watching the stars while Jamie slept, he finally opened up. "I never knew how to be a father," he said quietly. "I thought I did. Before the accident, things were easier. We were a happy family. I was busy with work, but I thought I had time. I thought I could always make up for it later." Emily listened silently. "When Claire died, I broke. Didn't know how to be both a father and a mother. I tried to fix everything with money. I thought if I gave Jamie the best care, it would be enough. But it wasn't. He didn't need money. He needed me, and I wasn't there." Emily reached over and placed a hand on his. "It's not too late. You're here now, and that matters." Thomas looked at her eyes full of pain and gratitude. "You've given him more than I ever could. You've given him life again." "You gave him a chance," Emily replied. "You brought him here, gave him safety. That matters too." That quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close. A deep respect, a shared understanding, as two people from different worlds, connected by a child and a second chance. As the days turned into weeks, Emily became more than just a caregiver. She became part of their family. She cooked meals, laughed with the staff, helped Jamie with his therapy, slowly helped Thomas heal. Jamie called her his best friend. Thomas began spending less time at work and more time at home. He even took Jamie to the park for the first time since the accident. With Emily by their side, the three of them laughed like a real family. But Emily never forgot where she came from. Every weekend, she visited her mother and Noah. She brought gifts, paid the bills, made sure they were comfortable. And every time she returned to Thomas's house, she brought a piece of her love with her. One day, while helping Jamie with a painting project, Emily asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Jamie smiled. "I want to be like you." "Like me," she laughed. "What does that mean?" Someone who makes people feel happy and safe? Emily's heart swelled. Thomas overheard from the hallway, stood there quietly, eyes moist, heart full. He knew then, without a doubt, that bringing Emily into their lives had been the best decision he had ever made. She hadn't just changed Jamie's life. She had changed his too, and for the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Real, powerful hope. The kind that only comes from love, kindness, and a second chance. The morning sun slipped softly through the large windows of the Whitmore mansion. In the kitchen, the smell of warm toast and fresh fruit filled the air. Jamie sat at the breakfast table, happily munching on a slice of melon, while Emily gently teased him about his messy face. Thomas watched quietly from the other side of the table, sipping his coffee, but not saying much. His eyes, however, were full of thought. There was something different about him today. Over the past few weeks, something had changed inside Thomas. He had started doing things he'd never thought he would do again. He read bedtime stories to Jamie. He learned how to help with Jamie's physical therapy exercises, and even helped Emily cook once, though he burnt the eggs. Jamie had laughed so hard that morning. Those small moments had begun to add up, shaping a version of Thomas that felt more human, more present, and more like a father. But deep inside, Thomas still felt he hadn't done enough. Yes, Jamie was smiling again. Yes, he was healing. But most of it had happened because of Emily. She had come into their lives with nothing but kindness, and somehow, with no money or power, she had given them everything. And the truth was, Thomas didn't want to lose her. Not just for Jamie's sake, but for his own. That morning after breakfast, Thomas asked Emily to meet him in the garden once Jamie had settled down for his nap. She looked a bit surprised, but agreed with a soft nod. When she stepped into the garden later, she found Thomas standing near the fountain, dressed neatly, but his expression was more thoughtful than usual. The sky was clear, and birds chirped in the distance, but the air around them felt serious. "Is everything all right?" Emily asked gently. Thomas turned to face her. "It's more than all right, but I have something important I want to ask you." She raised her eyebrows slightly. Unsure of what was coming, he took a breath and began. "You've been in our lives for only a short time, but you've done more for my son than anyone else ever has. You brought him back to life, Emily. You gave him laughter. You gave him love. And you've shown me what it really means to be a father." Emily's cheeks turned pink, and she looked down shyly. "I only did what I could. Jamie's a special boy." Thomas smiled. "Yes, he is. And you treated him like he wasn't broken, like he wasn't different, like he matters." He paused again and looked her straight in the eyes. "I want to ask you to stay with us, not just as Jamie's caregiver, but as part of our family. I want to make sure you never have to worry again. I want to give you everything you need: security, support, comfort. You deserve it. More importantly, your family deserves it too." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "I hadn't expected that. I don't know what to say. I'm offering you a full-time position here." He continued, "Not just a job. I want to pay for your nursing education. I want to provide a home for your mother and your brother. You shouldn't have to choose between your dreams and your responsibilities." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. Her heart was pounding. "You'd really do that?" she asked softly. Thomas nodded. "Yes, you've helped us without asking. For anything in return, you changed our lives. Let me do something in return." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. No one had ever offered her such kindness before, not without a price, not without an angle. But Thomas wasn't doing it out of guilt or pity. He was doing it with sincerity, with respect, and maybe even a quiet kind of love. I need to talk to my mom," she finally said, wiping her eyes. "Of course," Thomas said gently. "Take all the time you need." That evening, Emily visited her old apartment. She knocked on the door, and Noah rolled over to greet her with a big grin. "You're back." Her mother sat up from the couch, smiling warmly. "We missed you, sweetheart." They all sat down together, and Emily explained everything. She told him about the offer, about the opportunity to go back to school, about the chance to give them a better life. Her mother listened quietly and placed a hand over Emily's. "You've done enough for us. More than enough. This is your chance. Take it." Even Noah smiled and said, "You can help even more people if you become a nurse, Emmy." Emily hugged them both tightly. Her heart was full, but it also felt light for the first time in a long time. She knew what she had to do. The next day, she returned to the mansion and found Thomas waiting in the same garden spot. "I spoke to my family," she said, smiling, "and I'd be honored to accept your offer. Maybe even a little emotional. Thank you, Emily. Emily, you have no idea what this means to us." From that moment, everything began to change. Emily's life took a turn she had never imagined. She officially moved into the mansion, and a new apartment was arranged for her mother and Noah in a nearby community with better care facilities. Thomas hired a private tutor to help Noah with his education and physical therapy. Medical expenses were covered. Bills were no longer a worry. Emily also enrolled in a part-time nursing program, attending classes 3 evenings a week while still caring for Jamie during the day. Thomas made sure she had everything she needed: study time, transport, books, even a quiet study room in the mansion. But what touched Emily the most wasn't the money or comfort. It was the respect. Thomas never made her feel like a charity case. He never treated her like a servant or an employee. She was treated like an equal, like someone who belonged. As for Jamie, he was overjoyed. With Emily always nearby and his father more involved than ever, he became more confident. His therapy showed real progress. He even asked to visit his old school one day and surprise his classmates. That day was emotional for everyone. Jamie rolled into his classroom with a wide smile, and the children cheered. Emily and Thomas stood at the back, watching as Jamie proudly told his friends about his new life, his adventures, and how he was working hard every day. On the drive home, Jamie said, "This was the best day of my life." Emily glanced in the rearview mirror and caught Thomas smiling with quiet pride. That night, after Jamie had gone to bed, Thomas and Emily sat in the living room with cups of tea in their hands. The fireplace crackled softly. There was a calm in the room, a feeling of peace neither of them had felt in years. "You know," Thomas said, "I used to think I had everything. Money, power, success. But I was alone. I didn't know what I was missing until you walked into that diner." Emily smiled. "All I did was bring pancakes," he chuckled. "No, you brought life and love." She looked down, then back at him. "You brought it too. You just needed someone to remind you how." Sat there in silence for a while, comfortable and content. Everything had changed. The lonely billionaire was now a father full of warmth. The struggling waitress was now a student, a caregiver, and a woman with a future. And a little boy who once felt forgotten now knew what love truly looked like. They didn't need to say anything more that night, because sometimes change doesn't come from big plans or grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a small act of kindness and grows into something more powerful than anyone could imagine. The sun rose slowly over the Whitmore mansion, lighting up the garden and warming the soft curtains in Emily's room. Birds chirped gently outside as she sat by the window, sipping her morning tea. It had become part of her routine now awake. Up early, help Jamie get ready, prepare breakfast, then take a few peaceful minutes to breathe before the day began. Life had changed. So much since the day she accepted Thomas's offer. She had gone from being a tired waitress in a roadside diner to living in a warm, welcoming home with people who cared for her just as much as she cared for them. But most of all, she had become someone who made a real difference, not just for Jamie and Thomas, but for herself too. That morning was special. Emily could feel it in her heart. Even before anything happened, Jamie's laughter filled the hallway as he rolled his wheelchair down to the breakfast table. Thomas followed close behind, holding a small stack of papers and smiling more freely than he ever had before. "Guess what?" Emmy said. Grinning up at her, Emily smiled. "What?" "I drew something for you." He held up a crayon drawing with shaky but colorful lines. It showed 3 people, himself in his wheelchair, Emily in her nurse uniform, and Thomas standing beside them. At the top, He had written in big, uneven letters, "My family." Emily stared at it for a moment, speechless. Her eyes filled with tears, and she knelt down to hug him tightly. "I love it, Jamie," she whispered. "I really do." Thomas stood quietly behind them, the paper in his hand still unread. When Emily looked up, he gave her a small nod and offered the papers to her. "There's something I want to show you too," he said. She took the papers and began to read. Her eyes widened slowly as she moved through each page. It was an official Documentan invitation. Thomas had created a new foundation in the Jamie Whitmore Care Project, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting families with disabled children. The foundation would offer free caregiver training, home care support, emotional counseling, financial help for low-income families across the country. And right there on the front page was her name, Mimily Dawson, listed as the co-founder and director of care programs. She looked up at him in shock. "Thomas, I don't know what to say. You deserve this," he said gently. "You've lived that struggle. You understand what families like ours go through every single day. Who better to lead this than someone who's lived it with?" Love, Emily couldn't believe it. Just months ago, she was cleaning greasy tables and walking home after midnight with sore feet. And now, she was being asked to lead a nationwide foundation to help others like her. It felt like a dream, but I'm not qualified, she said softly. "I'm not even finished with nursing school yet," Thomas smiled. "That's okay, you don't need a degree to have a heart. You've already changed more lives than you. No, the rest. We'll figure it out together." She looked down at the drawing Jamie had made. My family. This wasn't just a job. This was her life now. It's her real life. One filled with meaning, care, and purpose. In the weeks that followed, everything started moving quickly. Thomas held a press conference to announce the foundation. Emily stood beside him, nervous but proud, as cameras flashed and reporters asked questions. She spoke from the heart about her brother Noah, her mother, the hardships they faced, and how one simple act of kindness had changed her entire world. The story went viral. News outlets called her the angel waitress and the girl who healed a billionaire's heart. But Emily didn't care about fame. All she cared about was helping more families like hers. She began working with therapists, nurses, and teachers to build the foundation's programs. She designed courses for young caregivers, arranged home visits for disabled children, and even created a hotline for parents who needed emotional support. She worked hard, but this time it didn't drain her. It gave her energy because it was filled with purpose. Meanwhile, Jamie was thriving. His therapy was going better than ever. He started drawing more, reading aloud, and even asked if he could try painting with his feet. Emily found an art teacher who specialized in helping children with disabilities. And Jamie's confidence soared. Thomas, too, had become a different man. He wasn't just the quiet, serious billionaire anymore. He'd become a real father. He'd cooked breakfast with Jamie on weekends, helped with homework, and told funny bedtime stories that made Jamie laugh so hard he'd almost fall out of his chair. Sometimes he'd join Emily in the kitchen and ask for tips on making pancakes, though he still burned them more often than not. One evening, months after the foundation had launched, Emily sat on the front porch with Noah and her mother, Thomas. Had invited them to live in a guest house on the property so they could be closer and more comfortable. "You look so happy," her mother said, gently touching Emily's cheek. Emily smiled. "I am. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." That night, while walking through the garden alone, Emily found Thomas sitting on the same bench where he had once offered her a job. The moonlight cast a soft glow on the grass, and the sound of water from the fountain filled the silence. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He looked up and smiled. "Always." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Thomas spoke. "You know, I used to sit here every night after Claire died. I felt empty. I didn't know how to go on. I thought if I kept working, if I stayed busy, I'd stop feeling the pain." Emily nodded quietly, listening. "But then you came," he continued, his voice soft. "You brought light into this place. Into me, into Jamie. I don't think I ever told you how much I needed that." Emily placed her hand gently over his. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I see it every day." There was a pause. The garden felt still, like it was holding its breath. "I never thought I could love again," Thomas said. "But I do. I love my son. I love the life we've built. And I think I love you too." Emily looked at him, eyes wide, heart pounding. She didn't say anything right away. But she didn't pull her hand away either. Instead, she leaned her head gently on his shoulder and whispered, "Then maybe we've both been given a second chance." That night, beneath the stars, two broken hearts that had once lived in different worlds quietly promised to move forward. Together, the months turned into a year. The foundation grew rapidly. Families from all over the country sent letters thanking Emily and Thomas. Emily's face appeared on magazine covers and health conferences, but she stayed humble. She never forgot where she came from, and she made sure no one else did either. Noah began walking with the help of new equipment provided by the foundation. Their mother's health stabilized. Jamie painted a beautiful piece that won first place at a local art competition, a picture of his family, standing side by side in a garden full of light. One day, Jamie stood in front of a small audience at the opening of a new foundation branch in another city. He held the microphone with both hands and said, "When my mom died, I was very sad. I thought the world had forgotten about me. Then Miss Emily came, and she helped my dad remember how to be happy. She helped me remember how to smile. And now we help other families smile too." The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Later, as Emily stood beside him, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Emily hugged him tightly and whispered back, "Thank you for teaching me what love really means." And so, the story that began with a simple plate of pancakes in a small diner ended with a new beginning, a life full of hope, healing, and second chances, because sometimes the people who have the least to give end up giving the most, and one act of kindness, given without expecting anything in return, can change the world forever.